we are discussing whether immigration could emerge as one of the key issues in the upcoming US presidential election. Let me go back to Pathikrit Pain at this point. Pathikrit, I want you to address the question that I raised earlier, about the fear that all this endless talk about illegal immigration or immigration in general sort of, is likely to further fuel the xenophobia and racism that already exists in large sections of American society, and which Trump has done everything in his power to whip up further and capitalize on for political and electoral gains. In fact, his critics say that a lot of his rhetoric around immigrants, is almost reminiscent of Adolf Hitler and the language used by Hitler, because Trump has said things like migrants are poisoning the blood of America. And we all remember that infamous travel ban that was imposed on Muslim countries, which, by the way, he's promised to bring back if re-elected to office. Are those not legitimate concerns?
Neha, political parties and politicians have the habit of, making rhetorics and statements. But if we get into the brass tacks of it, I personally believe for any elected government or an elected representative, their first responsibility is always towards their legal citizens and the electorate, and then they can talk about humanity towards others. But if they do the opposite, then they will be questioned. Let me talk about one thing first. Biden tries to project that he's very humanitarian, but if you look at the approach of Biden administration towards what is happening in Gaza, or what they did in terms of allowing a war to proliferate in Ukraine and region, which they could have prevented by not allowing NATO to have its misadventures of expansion, or what Biden did by letting the whole of Afghanistan in the lurch by suddenly withdrawing, then I don't think these are examples of Biden being too much humanitarian in his own character. I think there are other schemes going on. That part we should look into, because there are videos available on TikTok as to how illegal immigration can be done successfully. And recently, the CEO of TikTok was, scrutinized and questioned in the Senate. The other issue is this: you talk to any legal citizen of United States who is an African American, you talk to anybody who is of Indian origin, everybody today would say one thing, that I want security in my neighborhood. We do not allow an unknown person to enter our house or the courtyard. And at the same time, if you are allowing disproportionately large number of people to enter, and it is creating socio-economic, political crisis, security crisis, and invariably people will question. Now, in that particular issue, if we use statements or words like xenophobia, well, invariably some would use that statement. There's no denial of that. But even during the Middle East crisis, where ISIS became a very, very big challenge, countries like Saudi Arab, United Arab Emirates, even Qatar put severe restrictions on traveling by Muslims from other countries in the whole of the Middle Eastern region. So the fact of the matter is this: it is important for the federal government of every country to definitely look into the humanitarian aspect. But if that impacts the employment opportunities, the sustenance issues, the security issues, and overall future of a country, then invariably that country, that government will be questioned. There has to be some kind of proportion. That proportion today is getting broken down. If a city has 100 people, you can take care of 5. You can take care of 7. But if a city of 100 eventually has to take care of 30 people or 40 people, and then they start creating chaos, invariably the whole equation gets disturbed. That is the whole issue behind the whole crisis. It is not that Trump suddenly will solve all the problems, but it would definitely become an election issue. What Biden has to do is to be a little more rational. You are first and foremost accountable to your own citizens, and then take care of within your limited abilities of others. That's the thing.
Okay, so it's an emotive issue. We all agree. It's a very, very divisive and polarizing issue. And I think it'll be safe to assume that it could emerge as one of the key issues in the upcoming election. And that brings us to this question, Adit Kothari. Do you believe that President Biden can still course correct between now and November? Like I said earlier, his counter argument to Trump is, we tried to bring in a bipartisan border security legislation, which is, the toughest ever such law that this country would have ever seen. But you killed it, the Republicans killed it, because you want to exploit this in the election. Join hands with us. Let's pass this bill into law. And, we're going to have tighter immigration controls in the country. Do you believe that will wash with the electorate in America?
Just looking at the pulse of the people and the pulse of the ground, I think it's going to be very difficult for anybody to sell that argument or anybody to buy that argument. You've had X number of years to demonstrate your ability to control illegal immigration, and you've failed. You've caused a catastrophe in the United States, in the border states especially. The illegal immigration is essentially pushing the system towards a tilt where it's bound to break. Your social, your economic, and your political atmosphere is on a high rhetoric, which is why ex-President Trump can actually come into the election campaigning mode, and he can say things like, we're going to do ideological screenings of immigrants. So basically what he's saying is, whoever is coming into the country, we're going to conduct ideological screenings to ensure that they do not hold any sort of jihadi sympathies, and only then we will be allowing them to come into the country. So, those are the kind of things which President Trump has been allowed to talk about, and the blame predominantly lies with the Biden administration, because you've essentially given him that platter. You've essentially designed it for him to ensure that he can use this as a complete science during his election campaigning. Neha.
Okay. Ambassador Sharma, I'll ask you the same question. Is course correction on this front possible, or has the damage already been done? And do you think it is extensive enough to hurt Biden significantly in the upcoming election? Because on the one hand, it seems like Trump wants to make this the key issue, but of course, going by President Biden's State of the Union address, it is very clear that he wants to talk about democracy being under threat as his poll plank. He wants to turn that into his poll plank in the November election.
Well, the immigration issue, Trump will have to find some idiom, something which is simple and which goes straight down to people. So far as has been said, whatever he has done seems to, be very thin because of the groundswell of opinion and polarization which has been triggered by Trump campaign. Within his own party, in the GOP, there's no one today who can counter Trump's arguments, even about economy. I mean, the damage it will do to the American economy if they were to go whole hog on restricting immigration. And illegal immigration is one point. So they use that as the anchor, and then they attack all immigrants. So, and that goes well with the Trump electorate. So this is where the problem is. Now, Biden has said that he is changing tack. He wants to make democracy as the main plank, and also personality, persona of Trump. So his attack on Trump also has been, on what he stands for, and has been said earlier that some of the phrases he's used go back to a very dark period of European history. But recently also Trump has been quoted saying that these are not people, I don't consider them people. These are very strong, very racially tinted words. So how does this go with people? Because those who are not, those who are liberal, they have been marginalized. They have been put to the corner, not marginalized, but they have been on the defensive. And this whole, groundswell of anti-immigration, racial, this thing is growing day by the day in the US. So,
okay.
I find it very difficult unless Biden comes back, in the coming months with some which will go charismatically into people. And American people are like that. The elections are not fought on reason or thought, well thought through things. They need simple things to go. Like Reagan, for instance, he just won, though the Democratic
Perhaps,
campaign.
sir, that's true the world over, isn't it? That's how, that's why they say democracy is a messy business. Democracy is a messy business. We know that here in India, and I guess the Americans also know it all too well. I'm out of time. But Irina, very quickly, 30-second response. There are two competing narratives here. Immigration is a complete mess, disaster in the United States. That's one. The other is democracy is under assault. Which of these narratives is likely to sell better in the November election?
Actually, both narratives are to some extent true, but sticking to only one is not going to serve either side's interests. All depends on which party breaks first and takes common sense measures to address security and humanitarian issues in a way that's legal, that's unifying and non-polarizing. So far, I don't see other party willing to budge, but we will see what happens in November. But I do think that acting in a way that's self-serving, that is placing President Trump's personal interests above national security, is not going to help Republicans.
All right. Well, we don't know which way it will go, but going by what pollsters and pundits have been saying, it is likely to be a very close election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And yes, immigration will be one of the big issues, as will be democracy. Let's see who wins. On that note, Pathikrit Pain, Adit Kothari, Irina Sukuman and Ambassador Shilkant Sharma, thank you so much to all of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, let's now turn our attention to a part of the world that unfortunately is being neglected by mainstream media the world over. But it is a story that needs our urgent attention. Sudan is being ripped apart. Civilians caught up in Sudan's civil war have given graphic accounts of rape, ethnic violence and street executions. Top UN officials have said the conflict has plunged the country into one of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history and could trigger the world's largest hunger crisis. There are also fears that in Darfur, in the west of the country, a repeat of what the US called genocide 20 years ago may be beginning to unfold. In mid-February, the Sudanese army retook the city, one of three along the River Nile that form Sudan's wider capital, Khartoum. Civilians have now started to return, but mortars still fall every day. For international media, gaining access to cover the civil war that erupted last April has been difficult. The once bustling heart of Omdurman has been transformed into a thinly inhabited wasteland. The vicious power struggle between the country's military and its former ally, the Rapid Support Forces or RSF paramilitary group, has killed at least 14,000 people across the country, possibly many more. For nearly a year, the army and the RSF have battled over Khartoum and the nearby cities. The RSF has taken control of areas south of the capital as well as large swaths of Darfur, which has been in turmoil for years, with violence between its various African and Arab communities. Women who escaped Darfur to neighboring Chad have given horrific accounts of being raped, sometimes multiple times, by militiamen. Men in the camp say they had escaped street executions and abductions. Omdurman's old market, once busy with locals and visitors, is in ruins today. Its shops looted bare. Most vehicles on the roads are military. More than 3 million people have fled Khartoum state in the past 11 months. But some Omdurman residents have refused to leave, and most of them are elderly. The Sudanese military has been criticized for its heavy use of aerial bombing, including in civilian areas where RSF fighters hide out, though it says it takes necessary precautions to protect civilians. Victims of rape can often face a lifetime of stigma and marginalization from their own families and communities in this part of the world. But in the sprawling refugee camps over the border in Chad, the volume of emerging testimonies of egregious sexual violence is forcing a new, grim level of openness. Rape is being used as a weapon of revenge, the women say. The RSF's expanding domination in Darfur, supported by allied Arab militias, has brought in with it a surge in ethnically driven attacks on the black African population, especially the Masalit ethnic group. The United Nations has documented about 120 victims of conflict-related sexual violence across the country, which it says is a vast underrepresentation of the reality. It says men in RSF uniform and armed men affiliated with the group were reported to be responsible for more than 80% of these attacks. Separately, there have also been reports of sexual assaults by the Sudanese military. During the war in Darfur 20 years ago, an Arab militia called the Janjaweed, in which the RSF has its roots, was mobilized by former President Omar al-Bashir to crush a rebellion by non-Arab ethnic groups. The UN says 300,000 people were killed and rape was widely used as a way to terrorize black African communities and force them to flee back then. Some Janjaweed leaders and Bashir have been indicted by the International Criminal Court on charges of genocide and crimes against humanity. They have denied all the charges and no one has been convicted. Aid agencies warn of a humanitarian situation spiraling completely out of control, with the UN's children's agency, UNICEF, saying some communities are on the brink of famine in Sudan. The US says both sides have committed war crimes, and the RSF and its allied militias have also committed crimes against humanity as well as ethnic cleansing. 11 months into the war, there is little sign of any will on either side to end the fighting. Most of those who are able to leave have fled the country already. And as conflict, hunger and disease continue, many people wonder what will be left for anyone to declare victory over. That is the state of Sudan today. Well, we will continue to keep track of that story for you. Let's now turn our attention to some other news. Prime Minister Modi's two important telephonic conversations today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today spoke to both Russian President Vladimir Putin and, well, the latter's bitter rival, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And both Putin and Zelensky, sources say, have invited Prime Minister Modi to their respective countries after the Lok Sabha elections, as both these countries and their leaders see India as a peacemaker. Now, in his phone conversation with the Russian President, Prime Minister Modi congratulated Putin on his re-election for a fifth term at the